We are It's Just a Hill, a cycling club that promotes inclusion, judgment-free, with no gatekeepers. Focused on creating content from behind the handlebars to in the studio, It's Just a Hill is producing videos and podcasts to spread the message that cycling is for everyone. We are focused on reminding everyone that riding your bike can help you overcome any obstacle, because after all, it's just a hill. Hello and welcome to another episode of the It's Just a Hill Cycling Podcast. I think we are calling these special edition episodes. We are back. Week 2 of the tour has happened. I am John Stenning, sitting here with Cal Goodhouse. Hi, Cal.
Thanks, John.
How are you?
Doing great.
We stage, oh my goodness, let me scroll up. 15 or 16 state was today. 15 was today. We're releasing this on the rest day of the tour, heading into week 3. We're going to recap what happened in week 2. Pretty exciting.
Week 2 has been fantastic.
Yes.
Not only do we have epic GC battle,
yes,
but we've had some great breakaway stages.
And finally, breakaway stages.
And one for the sprinters today, finally.
Yes, that is right. So let's rewind a little bit. The last time we were here, we were on the first rest day, which was on Monday, July 11th. Let's start talking about stage 10, which was on the following day, July 12th. Port de Soleil to Megève, right? This was 148 kilometers, hilly with a hilltop finish. What are some things that stand out about this stage, right? First stage after the rest day.
Yeah, the teams finally let a break go up the road.
Yep.
The GC teams had been controlling the race up until this point, and finally, because the Alps were coming up the next 2 days, they said, we don't want to race that hard. We'll let
took about 60K for the breakaway. Well, there was the 25 men in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big break goes up the road. A lot of heavy hitters.
Yeah. Betty All's up there. Fred Wright's up there, right? Zimmerman, Georg Zimmerman.
Yeah. And the thing that stands out for me about this stage was really the way Magnus Kort Nielsen rode it. It was a very patient ride, I would say, by Magnus.
Not the most patient person sometimes. I don't think so.
No?
Based on the way he rode in the first week of the tour.
Yeah. I mean, he...
not that it's a slight to him.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Fantastic guy. I just started following him on Instagram because of
quite
this tour, and he's
character.
Hilarious.
Yeah, quite the character.
He won this stage.
Yes. Right.
The post that he put out afterwards was hilarious.
Yes.
Talking about how wearing Rafa Palace clothing
helped him win.
Yes. And, enhanced his masculinity and things like that.
Yeah.
But, there were a couple other guys up the road or who had gotten away. There's a group of 4 with about a kilometer to go. And those guys started... basically sort of checkmating each other. Nobody wanted to lead out the sprint.
Right.
So they were hesitating. Kort, who had been dropped, basically sat in the wheels, let the other riders bridge back up to that group.
Yep.
And then he exploded and took the win.
There's a group of 4, right, with about a kilometer to go. And then another group is like approaching them, right, with about 500 meters. And, it's basically just Magnus Kort and Nick Schultz at the end, right?
Yeah, it came down to a very close sprint between those two.
Right. And it was even hard to tell, I think, right at the finish. Had to sort of watch the overhead replay. And then, it was like, about a quarter of a wheel, right? Second tour win in Magnus's career.
Super close. Very exciting.
Yeah. And so this is, and at the beginning of the day, right? Pog is in yellow and white, right? Jonas is in second, and Geraint is in third, right? Wout is still in green. Simon Geschke, he's got the KOM, he's got the polka dot jersey, and Pog holds on to the lead after this stage. Still has the 11-second lead, right? But Leonard Kemna came really close to actually almost took the yellow here.
That's right, because he was in the breakaway.
And so strategically... knowing what we know now, I guess it's a little bit different, right? Fast forward, Pog is no longer in yellow. But at this time, do you give up Pog and UAE fought pretty hard at the end there to make sure that the break wasn't ahead too much so that Leonard Kemna does not slip into yellow for a day or two?
Right. So just in case the listeners don't know how this works sometimes in the Tour, basically what happens is that the team who has the rider in yellow has to kind of control the race. So sometimes a rider like Pogačar, who's a favorite to win the race, will let somebody who doesn't really have a chance of winning the overall take the lead,
right,
just to take some pressure off him and his teammates.
Right.
And so a lot of people now in retrospect are saying that UAE should have given the lead to Kamna there.
Sure.
Because it would have made a lot less work for them. And actually, if you look back to week one, they probably could have given it to Paulus and made EF control the race.
Right.
But instead, Pog decided he wanted to sprint for those time bonuses on the line.
Right.
So
yeah, interesting. I mean, at the time, it seemed like the perfect stage to give up yellow, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, it happened strategically and historically in the Tour to do that at this time. Knowing that, you're about to head into the Alps, and then like knowing what the court, right? Because this is a 3-week race. So the strategy of it is very involved. So yeah. Interesting stage.
And UAE is, they already lost one teammate to COVID.
Yeah.
They lost another one, at this stage, George Bennett, who was Pog's best climber, also catches COVID and drops out. And UAE also ends up losing a sports director later this week to COVID as well. So,
and Rafa Micah has COVID, but the term viral load, they should have chose something else.
Yeah. So the UCI, which is the governing body for cyclists, now allows riders with COVID to actually ride in the peloton as long as the levels of COVID.
Right. How it's based on how infectious they are. Right. So, interesting. I'm sure there's something corrupt happening behind the scenes there.
Yeah, it does lead to a lot of like speculation about who might have it, and we don't know about it, but our journalistic integrity is too high. We won't speculate on things like that.
Yeah, we can. Okay, perfect. That was a nice quiet bark. Maybe we'll leave it in. Okay, so moving on. Next stage 11. Right, we're in the Alps. This is Albertville to Col de Grenon, mountain stage, summit finish, 151 kilometers. Man, this stage was a banger.
My God, this I think. In my opinion, I mean, it might be a little prone to hyperbole here, but
sure,
the best stage
ever,
maybe.
Oh my goodness,
at least in my lifetime.
Okay.
This is an amazing stage, tactically, on so many levels.
So let's set the stage a little bit. Right, we're in the high Alps. We're in the high Alps. There are 3 big climbs. There's a Telegraph, the Galibier, and it finishes up Col de Grenon for the final climb. Right at the start, there's a big attack from Wout and everyone's favorite Alpecin Deceuninck rider that also races cross and mountain bikes. So you really got to hone it in. It's this really tiny Venn diagram. Mathieu van der Poel goes off on the attack with Wout. 2 great friends, right? They love each other. We talked about them in the preview show. Do they love each other? It's a love-hate relationship.
A big question. So after, I think it was 2020, Van der Poel beats Wout in a 2-man sprint to win Flanders. Very close finish. And the question I think was put to Wout whether or not they were friends, and Wout said no. That they've been compared to each other since 2012, or since they were 12 years old, I should say, and they've been competitors their whole lives practically
on the same track too. A very similar track.
And so Wout said he didn't consider Van der Poel a friend. But after this stage, it kind of made you wonder.
It seemed like they were friends.
Yeah. It seemed like, Van der Poel had not been having a good race. No. He probably knew he wasn't going to make it to the end.
Right.
And he just wanted to go up the road with
what it seemed like his buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were up there smiling.
So he drops out after this stage, right? Van der Poel. And so I remember we were chatting about it, and it that's what it seemed like. Like he was saying bye to his friend and the Tour, right? And getting because he is a big name in cycling. So even though he isn't performing well, he's still wearing that jersey. He's showing off the sponsor. He's at the front with Wout in the green jersey, another exciting rider. So I mean, it helps for the team, right? I mean, you're not talking stage wins or anything, but That's what these sponsors are all about, is camera time.
It was just a really interesting moment for
Yes.
me. Like to
Yeah.
see him go up there with Wout just to kind of say goodbye. It was, I don't know. It was something special about it.
He's like an old soul. He's always crying about his grandpa and stuff. He's a real old soul, Maybe that's what it is.
Indeed. If people don't know, Van der Poel's grandfather was Raymond Poulidor, who is a rider in the 60s who finished second in the Tour de France like 5 times, never won it.
Right. But he comes from a cycling family. Mm-hmm. His dad is a coach or like very involved, Van der Poel's dad.
His dad
and he raced.
Was a racer.
Yeah.
I think a Flanders winner as well, I want to say.
Right.
And coaches now. I think he's fairly involved with the team.
I think he's involved with the team and it really involved Andre Van der Poel, I think.
Audrey
Van der Poel. Yeah. Right. 20 riders go up the road in a breakaway after 30 kilometers. Mm-hmm. And Jumbo goes hard with 60K left.
Amazing. So listeners, if you haven't seen this, go watch it. It, like I said, the one of the most amazing stages you'll ever see.
Yeah.
So 60 kilometers to go, which is a long way to go. Typically riders wait till the end to the finishing climb to try to attack. But instead, Roglic, who's 2 minutes down on Pogačar at this point, launches at the top of the telegraph and gets a gap.
Wout is still out front.
Correct.
Right.
Pogačar and Jonas go with Roglic.
Yep.
And then it just turned, these guys just start attacking each other again and again.
Right.
Roglic attacks, Pogačar covers. Jonas attacks, Pogačar covers.
Right.
Roglic attacks. And then Pogačar gets fed up and tries to attack himself.
Right.
It was
He's
nuts.
using so much energy. The Jumbo rider that is attacking is making him use that energy. The other Jumbo rider is just sitting on Pog's wheel, getting to sit in that like active recovery. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Knowing that Wout is up the road, right? So he's going to help once you get to him. And Primoz, man,
Great
what a
rider.
fighter.
What a fighter.
Yes.
You could see Pogačar panicking. He was on the radio calling for help.
Yeah.
Marc Soler, his domestique, tries to bridge up to him.
Right.
Soler
gets there.
Well, he almost closes the gap, and Roglic accelerates.
just goes.
And just makes it hurts him that much more trying to get on. So, but yeah, it kind of reminded me of watching, I'd say, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan fight Darth Maul.
Okay.
It was like that.
It is like that because you need to hit him from 2 angles.
Yeah.
Right? Like Darth Maul has a double-bladed lightsaber. So you need to go in with not only the Master Jedi, but also the Padawan, which is what we're seeing here.
Totally.
Primoz is the Master Jedi.
Yeah.
Jonas is the Padawan. And Pog ain't nothing but a Sith, even though Darth Maul is like, cool. Wow, and he's got the spikes, like the hair coming out of the helmet.
Seriously.
This is, okay, we got to meme this or something.
And just like Qui-Gon, Roglic basically sacrificed himself
Yes.
here. He, after this stage, he left it all out there. His performances kind of steadily go down
After this
because he just, and he's already injured. Remember, like he dislocated his shoulder.
Right.
So he used Pogačar's fear of him to the team's advantage.
Absolutely.
And did this so that Jonas could win.
Great performance on the stage by Thomas, right? He's there the whole time. Strategically just sits at whatever watt output he knows he can do up Granon at the end and just lets these other, like he's calling them young whippersnappers recently.
Yeah.
And so he's calling them these young whippersnappers, right? He's become this elder statesman of the tour and has a great stage, even though he's not really involved in this attacking. But he's like there the whole time, right? He's holding on to Soler's wheel. He's like, Bardet is there. Quintana is coming. Nairo Man is there. And like, I just love to see Quintana on TV.
Yeah. So when we finally get to the last climb to the Col du Granon, Pogačar had paced up the Galibier to try to control the race and shut down those attacks.
Right.
But as soon as we got to the Granon, it became apparent that Pogačar didn't have anything left in the tank.
Right.
And it just opened the race up for those other riders. So Quintana attacks first, Bardet goes, then Vingegaard goes, and Geraint waits a little bit longer to see if Pogačar wants to work with him. But as soon as he sees that Pogačar is Dunzo,
Right.
he goes himself.
Which does that bite Pog in the ass even more down the line, knowing now that, like, not to fast forward too much, but like Pog, right? Jonas gets this stage win. He puts 2 minutes and 33 seconds into Pog. So he comes up in that 11 seconds and puts 2 minutes and 22 seconds into him. Now Pog needs to work with a team like Ineos, but didn't have the energy to work with Geraint when he was in yellow, right? And so we're hearing now that, like, Thomas is basically telling him to, like, no, get out of here, you know? Like, we're going to work for our own stuff. We're not going to help you.
Yeah, the really interesting question, I mean, fast forwarding again a little bit here, but the really interesting thing for week 3 is going to be to see what Ineos wants to do.
Right.
Because they've been putting riders in the breakaway, kind of giving all their riders chances to win stages.
Right.
Thomas is sitting in 3rd place right now. The question is whether or not he wants to try to move up. Because, you know, we've seen some of his domestiques like Ghana, rather than help him, you know, try to win stages. Ghana, if they want to use him to upset the GC, they can.
Yeah.
They also have other riders in the top 10 on GC.
Right. They have 2 in the top 7 right now, don't they?
I think so. Something crazy like that. Yeah. But Geraint, he might not feel like he can take those 2.5 minutes back on Jonas. He's seen the level that they're riding at, and he might not think he's up for it.
Right.
He just seems to hold steady watts up the climb, like you said.
Yeah.
So maybe he's happy with 3rd, but if Ineos decides they want to try to upset the apple cart, then they're going to need to really string it out, start the Sky Train going.
Right.
And we'll see.
Yeah, so that's stage 11, right? Jonas is now in yellow, his first Tour de France stage win. Just, like, absolutely crushed that stage.
And I'd like to say, like, the reason I think this stage is so significant is because it is the first time we've seen Pogačar show any weakness.
Right.
We've said before, and it's been said on a million other news sources and things like that, that Pogačar looks unbeatable. He's superhuman, once in a generation talent.
Right.
When you have a dominant rider like this, there's inevitably questions about doping. People start to speculate: is he on the juice? Right. And I think the fact that he can be cracked like this shows that he is human, that tactically he does make mistakes, and that he is beatable, perhaps in this tour and for the next 10, 15 years as well.
Wouldn't that make cycling so much more exciting, just to know that there's a crack in his armor?
It's fantastic.
Because he's not going to go away.
No.
Right? This doesn't mean that he's going to, like, become a hermit all of a sudden. It's going to motivate him more if he doesn't win.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be on the phone trying to get UAE to get him some higher class domestiques for next year. Yeah. But I hope he also, pursues other goals like the Vuelta, like the Giro. Too often GC or Tour de France winners like Lance Armstrong and those guys only pursue the tour. Right. Or probably the sponsors only want them to do the tour. Right. But again, Eddie Merckx, won 5 tours, 5 Giros, and a Vuelta. If you really, I think we're kind of going back to that era of the 70s and stuff. Yeah. And so hopefully these guys do pursue other goals.
Right. So there's a little thing here. Who is Jonas Vingegaard?
Yeah, who is Jonas Vingegaard? So in the preview episode that we did,
I
was a little down on Jonas.
Yeah, I was not. I love him.
I take it all back. I take it all back.
What race, so what did they both just competed in a race, and I can't remember what
the Criterium du Dauphiné?
The Dauphiné.
Yeah.
Jonas impressed the shit out of me. And Primos's age seems to be against him. No offense to him. It's a young man's sport right now, right? With Pog, with the winner of stage 12, who we'll get to in just a second, with Jonas. So that was my main reason. I felt like they were at the same level in the past 6 months. And then 3 months ago, I felt like Jonas was riding with Roglic because they were like friends and teammates, and that he could have like dropped him, but it seemed like they were just like enjoying their time riding together, and then, okay, we're going to go to the tour together. Right. And so, yeah, like very little known about this. I'm sorry, go ahead. What do you have written about Jonas?
Well, I was going to say, so I didn't know much about him. So after this win, I was like, and because he kind of seemed to come out of nowhere last year for me. He hasn't had any other big wins or anything like that.
No.
So I did a little bit of research, try to figure out who is he, what's he like, that kind of thing.
Yes.
He's from a place called Hillerslev, Denmark.
Yes.
Which is a small
fishing town,
village.
Right? Yeah, fishing village.
300 people in his town.
Yeah.
In I think like the northern region of Denmark.
Denmark, yeah.
And I also checked out his Instagram, which is kind of a mix of like photos from the team and stuff like that, and then just like selfies of him and his wife and his little kid.
Yeah.
Which they sort of remind me. I'm not a very good photographer. These kind of remind me about the level of selfie that I post.
Okay.
It's like him with a goofy smile and his wife and kid in the background. It's very endearing, very cute. And Kate Wagner, who's a cycling journalist, she has her own blog called Derailleur. Go check it out. She does a nice profile of Vingegaard. Like you said, it's a fishing village. He worked in a fish factory as a teenager and would ride his bike on weekends.
Yeah. Former fishmonger Jonas Vingegaard is in the yellow jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working class parents.
Yep.
And so, and I'm a fan now. I've come around.
So it's interesting to think of like these, you talk about his Instagram and stuff, and it's interesting to think about these cycling celebrities, especially from a perspective of American sports culture, right? I follow American sports. I enjoy watching basketball, and I enjoy watching baseball. Those type of stars, even if they come from humble beginnings, seem to be put together in a different way, from such like a publicity standpoint, and everything is like curated, and you have an agent that represents you, like the way that you get signed and the way that you present yourself on social media and all of this. And sure, like Jumbo has a team behind them, right, that like do the stuff behind the scenes and post for their Instagram and tell Jonas, okay, you're going to post this. Every other post is going to be a picture that our professional photographers took. And then all the other ones can be like wherever in Denmark. They seem to be so much more humble and down to earth than your typical American like sport. And I don't know, it makes them all more endearing, right? Like, we've been talking about Pog a lot, like, via text, and I sort of approach it as like a Pog hater. And you seem to approach it more as like someone that roots for someone other than him, but you don't necessarily like hate him. My perspective comes from like I love the Red Sox and I hate the Yankees. You know what I mean? And so like I want to hate Pog because it makes it more exciting for Jonas, right? They're hard to hate. Right, like I came into the previous show hating Thomas. I love Ineos right now. I love them, and that I would have never said that. Even though even in the Sky Team days, I liked Bradley Wiggins. Wasn't ever a big Chris Froome fan. I mean, we're sort of off the rails here now, but it is so much more interesting to see them all as like these like, well, maybe not all of them, but like interesting people. And you can't like, I have a hard time hating even like the rival of my favorite, right? Whereas like it's easy for me to hate the Yankees or whatever.
Totally. I think Sky or Ineos probably is the Yankees of cycling because they have a huge salary, or at least they did in the 2000s, in those Chris Froome era years. But to your point, there are very few villains in cycling. There's a few. Yeah. There's guys like Gianni Moscon. Yes. I kind of think Alaphilippe's a little bit of a villain just because, well, I don't know. He wears a $500,000 watch in races. Which
so to me, I don't see him as a villain, but I see him as like a European techno party boy that like is like his dad's a villain. You know, like he's born into a villainous family,
Love
you know,
that.
but like he's like kind of indifferent to that because he just rides his bike all the time. But I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's so much fun.
He
you
is
know?
fun. He's very much he looks like a swashbuckler.
Yes.
You know, out there.
But you can see him twirling his mustache like Snidely Whiplash, like all evil and stuff. you know?
Definitely, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, very few villains in cycling. And when we talk about some of the winners of this second week, you know, there's a lot of great
Yes.
stories there. And I think there are a lot of working class, or a lot of cyclists come from working class backgrounds.
Yes, sure. And not that American athletes don't, but it seems that I don't know. There seems to be more there seems to be more separation between us and them in American sports than it does in, maybe it's all of European sports. Maybe that's just like that part of how much like we as an American culture like look up to like athletes in a way, like we put them on a pedestal, you know.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I love about cycling that you bring up is that to me it is more accessible because I can't go to Yankee Stadium and pitch,
Right.
But you and I could get on a plane tomorrow, fly to France, and go ride the Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah, sure. It might not be cheap.
No.
Right, but
we
you can
could
do it. You can do
the
it.
same roads, you know, the same cathedral.
Right.
We could go out there and see.
You're right.
And
Yeah,
see
right.
how
You
we
could just
compare.
ride up Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah,
Huh?
exactly.
Okay, speaking of stage 12,
Stage 12.
this is up Alpe d'Huez, right?
Alpe d'Huez, the most iconic climb of the tour, I would say.
Okay, can we just theorize why? Because I have a theory as to why it's the most iconic.
I'd love to hear it.
It's fun to say.
Alpe d'Huez?
Alpe d'Huez. It's fun to say. People are so simple that all you need is something that's fun to say, right? Because the Galibier and Col du Granon might be more exciting, but it's a little bit harder with an American accent to say Col du Granon, right? Whereas, like, I mean, technically you should say L'Alpe d'Huez or whatever, right?
L'Alpe, yeah.
But I'm not saying that because my French is not great. But yeah, an iconic mountaintop finish of the tour.
On Bastille Day.
Yes, on Bastille Day, which is the French Independence Day. Yes.
Yeah, and this is a switchback climb.
Yeah.
Different nationalities stake out their corners.
Yes.
So you have a Dutch corner. The crowds press in on the riders. It is, you know, when you think of the scenes from the tour,
Right.
this is what you get.
Right.
you
If
know?
you're not familiar with the tour, and some reason you're listening to this podcast, you've seen pictures. You're like, oh, I've seen pictures of the tour. You've seen Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So 165 kilometers, mountains, right, with a summit finish. I was watching the GCN recap and they called it the day after the day before. And I just absolutely loved that because the day before was such like a day, right? And this is also a very exciting day.
It really
You talk
is.
about stage 11 being maybe one of the best tactically ridden races. To me, this is one of the best solo performances I have ever seen in cycling. And it has made me fall in love with our man, Tom Pidcock, even more than the last week when I just loved his interview so much.
Yeah.
This stage was killer.
It was
for more than reasons than just Pidcock too.
It was amazing. And certainly Pidcock's tactics came into play, but
Yes.
it was also just his sheer ability.
Yes.
His bike handling skills, descending.
He's coming around corners. He's coming behind people, right? So I believe a break goes up the road, right? And Pidcock, in order to get from the peloton to the break, as he's bombing down the Galibier, he's weaving through people, right? Froome is in the mix in this stage. Finally, we have not seen much of Chris Froome. I mean, competing in the Tour alone is such a feat to think that that's what he came back from, right? He crashed, 2 or 3 years ago now? I think it was 3.
Yeah, he missed 2019.
Right,
Correct,
so it was
yeah.
early 2019. Yeah. Right, this is a beautiful stage. You mentioned the switchbacks, breathtaking views. This is also 70 years after the first Alpe d'Huez, which was the first summit finish of the Tour, which I thought was very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. And Pidcock descends down Galibier, right? So they go up the other side of the Galibier from the day before. And then he's bombing down. And it just was unreal. It truly was unreal.
For sure.
Yeah. So there's also a GC battle happening, right? Pog is trying to trying to put time into Jonas, and he's just not letting him, right? Jumbo's holding nice and steady. They're keeping together. Great work. Primoz puts in another great effort. Sepp Kuss really shows his climbing skills in this stage. Pog will go off on an attack. Jonas will stick to his wheel, and Sepp will just come out front and be like, relax. Basically, look back at Pog and be like, no, we're not letting this happen.
Yeah, Pog had promised after stage 11 that he would keep attacking.
Yes.
And he made good on those promises.
Yes.
Probably he would have been better just to sit in and recuperate. Cause
Sure.
He
put in a huge effort the day before.
A little bit of hubris, and he's going to keep attacking again and again and try to catch Jonas out whenever he can. I don't know if it's better for him to bide his time and wait for the moment rather than try to snatch every moment.
Sure.
But
those moments are running out.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. The pressure that I think is on him, or the pressure that he puts on himself, right? Like, he is a cocky young man. He is like always smiling. Even coming in second, he's smiling, which is like nice to see. But at the same time, like, he sort of has this extra arrogance about him. I mean, right? Everyone talks about him like he's a generational talent. There has to be some of that goes to your head. As humble as you are, as humble as a person can be, right? He's the best cyclist in the world. He might not be in yellow right now, but like, he is. It's almost undisputable. Unless, is it indisputable or undisputable?
Indisputable.
Thank you. Indisputable. Unless Jonas puts another 3 minutes into him, right? Pog is still up there as like one of the greats.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And Jonas, we should mention, he's 130 pounds. He's 5'8", 130 pounds.
Right.
Pogacar is a larger guy. I think he's 6'1".
Right. 170-ish, I think. Yeah.
Or maybe I don't know.
Yeah, right.
We'll look it up. But Jonas, because he's lighter, he excels on climbs like the Col de Granon, which are steeper.
Right.
Whereas Pogacar, a better time trialist, and as we saw in the first week, better on the cobbles.
Right.
So I would agree with you that he is probably the best rider in the world because he's more of an all-rounder.
Sure. Right. But when you go to stages like the Alps, that's when Jonas has the chance. I mean, and that was the strategy, right? That's why you put 2 minutes and 22 seconds into him at that time.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be harder for a normal cyclist that isn't Pog to bring that time back. Now, not to get ahead of ourselves again, he hasn't gotten any of that time back yet, but we're about to go into the Pyrenees after this rest day. And those are the type of climbs that lend themselves to Pog a little bit more than Jonas because, they're not as steep and they're shorter. So still interesting things to come. Thomas has another great stage. This is the stage after this stage is when he calls them the young whippersnappers. I think it was the Lantern Rouge cycling podcast mentioned how Thomas has like the view of this amazing battle that's happening, like in cycling, like this this once in a lifetime like rivalry, and he's getting to like just be third and watch these two fight each other and attack each other.
He just sits on the wheels and has them do the work.
Yeah. He's like, look at this. Like, he likes cycling, like he's getting to watch this amazing thing happen in front of him. And yeah, this win brings Pidcock into the top 10, and he's the youngest winner ever to ride up Alpe d'Huez.
Really amazing.
Amazing.
I'm sure there'll be speculation as to whether or not Pidcock will become a GC rider in the future. But
he's a cyclocross world champion. He's a mountain bike gold medal winner. He's got a lot of different aspirations. After this stage, he gave another great interview, and he said he could fall out the back of every single stage for the rest of the tour, and it would not matter to him. That's how much this meant to him.
Yeah. Winning a stage in the Tour is a career-defining achievement for any rider, which we'll talk about with some of these other winners that we're going to see.
And then Froome, we mentioned Froome a little bit. He does come in third place on Alpe d'Huez. Good for him, even though I think he's quite boring, and he'll just stare at his stem the whole ride.
Froome does not look that good on a bike. He has kind of this weird...
Yeah, it's very strange.
Elbows out,
hands
never gets
on the
out
tops.
of the saddle.
But whatever. He's got good fitness.
Hopefully he'll try again in the Pyrenees. I'd love to see some more from his teammate, Michael Woods. Big fan of Michael Woods, but has been pretty quiet this tour. Yeah,
did Michael Woods have a crash earlier in the season?
I'm not sure.
I think he might have. So moving on, stage 13. This is a rolling stage. Bourg d'Ossonne. I'm not good at this.
Saint-Étienne.
So this is a fast start with another attack 30 kilometers in, first break happens. Ghana goes up the road, right? Jorgensen, Stefan Kung, amongst others. And immediately some sprinters are shot out the back. Sagan, Fabio Jakobsen. Wout just has that green jersey on lock.
No question.
Yeah. Not a great stage for Caleb Ewan. Unfortunately, he's had a couple of rough goes at it this tour. He goes down with 70K to go, catches a wheel, like it's a hard left turn or something. Peloton slows up. He catches a wheel of one of his teammates. They both go down. Not great.
Yeah, some real heartbreak for Ewan. He has not had, I think he also crashed out of the tour the year before.
Yes.
So real tough go of it lately for him. This is a brutal Tour de France with not many opportunities for sprinters. And so for him, it's really going to be a question of can he hang in there all the way through the Pyrenees to get to Paris for one last shot.
Right. Quick Step pulled a real shit move and attacked as soon as Caleb went down. You think Lefebvre is just like smoking a cigar, telling like, just do this. Piece of shit. So the breakaway's ahead by like a minute, right, with 44K to go at the top of the last climb. And then there's a two and a half minute gap and some attacks from the Peloton, but then they give up basically with like 12K to go. And so yeah, they give up with about 12K to go. The break gives up. The break goes away. The Peloton gives up. And this is an exciting finish.
Yeah, tactically, really masterpiece here. Pedersen knew that Ghana and Kung were the better time trialists, that they would try to attack him and drop him before the finish because he's the better sprinter. So what he did is he decided, I'm not going to wait for you to attack me. I'm just going to go and catch you off guard. And it worked. He goes up the road with two other riders. And Ghana and Kung are just left looking at each other, wondering who's going to do
Ghana kind of missed it, right? He's like
work.
eating food. And he kind of misses Pedersen go off the front.
Right. And so that happens, and nobody wants to do the work to close the gap because they don't want to burn their legs out before they get to the finish. And so it's just a stalemate to see who's going to flinch first. And if no one does, then Pedersen is going to get away. And he does. And he had two other riders with him. I think was it Jorgensen?
It might have been Jorgensen.
Yeah. Jorgensen and Fred Wright, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And not surprisingly, he roasted them in the sprint.
Yeah, his sprint was amazing. He ends up putting like 3 or 4 bike lengths into them. He's a first Tour de France win, right? He's a former world champion, has a lot of great opportunities, but hasn't like Trek has had an interesting tour. We've seen a lot of them on TV, but this is their first stage win too.
Yeah, Pedersen, I have a little bit of a soft spot for because he won the World Championship in 2019, and then 2020 happened and COVID happened, and he did not get to wear that jersey much and didn't have many chances to win in it.
Right.
So great to see him win.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been a great tour for Denmark so far, right?
Yes.
So this is a third stage win for that country's riders. We're talking about Magnus Cort Nielsen a lot before. Mads Pedersen, the Grand Depart took off from Copenhagen. It was amazing. What they did in Denmark was great, right? Their crowd control. I mean, Alpe d'Huez, people standing on the roads on Alpe d'Huez is cool for pictures, but it sucks for the riders.
Yeah.
They are way too close. There have been crashes before. Lance, say what you will about him, but he caught the camera strap for someone that was trying to take a picture of him. It like locked onto his hood and he went down really hard. These people are way too close to the riders. And even riders talk about how exciting it is, right? Like Pidcock really said, like it was so exciting. You're never going to be able to like feel that energy or anything, but it is dangerous. The crowd control is not great there. Denmark, crowd control was amazing.
Yeah, amazing. You have to be, if you ever go watch a pro race, be very careful not to, stick yourself out into the road to get on TV or something like that.
So you're pulling like a Steve Bartman. If you like baseball, you don't like cycling. Steve Bartman, he stole the ball over the side from the Cubs. They lost the World Series. It was a big deal. That's what you're doing if you're too close to a rider and like you interfere with them. People are lighting flares on the side of the road and smoke bombs. It sucks.
Yeah, almost every year there is some kind of incident involving a spectator.
Big one last year.
Huge. Yeah.
Dan Martin, right? Dan Martin.
Tony Martin.
Tony Martin. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's exciting, but at the same time, but I just think it's another reason to sort of the whole oh my goodness, that was unprofessional. But the whole country of Denmark, even though they're probably not listening to this podcast, what a great job they did.
Denmark, we love you.
Yeah, thank you, Denmark. Right, so Wout is still in green at this point. Jonas is still in yellow. He's got the same 222 over Pog. Then Thomas, Bardet, and Yates are finishing out the top 5 there. So yeah, stage 14.
Stage 14, Saint Etienne to Mende.
Yes.
Monde. Another day for the breakaway. The crazy thing here was that Pog tried to attack with 180 kilometers to go.
That's right. Goes off.
Yeah. So basically, when the stage is getting started, the breakaway is starting to get established. The other riders will kind of sit up a little bit, drink, take bottles, eat food, that kind of thing. Sometimes stop and go to the bathroom. And Pog noticed that Jonas wasn't quite up at the front. Wout was trying to bridge to the breakaway, and Pog got on his wheel and got up there and wanted to see if anybody would work with him. Obviously, Jumbo sees that, shuts it down.
Right.
But just really surprising to see that Pog would be sort of...
Yeah, 12K into this stage, right? It's 192K, so 12 kilometers in, which is 7 or so miles. This guy is like, let me out there.
Yeah, I think it's a waste of energy for him to try something like that, but...
Because they're not going to let it happen.
No.
No one's going to let it happen.
But
as impressive as it might have been,
right,
it would have gotten shut down.
Yeah, I don't know if it's hubris or just he's...
There's only so much time left. Yeah. He's getting antsy.
But it's also admirable. Like, I can respect it because it does, again, harken back to like the 1970s when people would try crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, so Jonas chases down. Things cool down about 30K into the stage. The break finally gets away. Really sad images of Caleb Ewan just off the back. I think the stage ends with some really nice images of Caleb and his teammates from Lotto Soudal crossing the finish line together. So there's a time, not time gap. What would you call it?
Oh, it's a time limit. A
time limit, right? So for this particular stage, after the winner, who ends up being Michael Matthews, who we'll talk about in a little bit, depending on how long the stage is and how much time the stage takes, the final person needs to get in over a certain amount of time. And for this stage, it was about 40 minutes or 42. And Caleb Ewan comes in at 40 minutes behind the leader. It's very nice with his teammates, right? He went down the day before, having a tough go at it. Hopefully he gets to bounce back after the rest day today. But some nice images there where they're holding hands. They all work together for him. So they do go back and get him.
Yeah. When a rider's in that situation, their director will actually calculate how fast they need to go in order to get.
Right. So they just say, hey, just maintain 22.
Right. And so they're not like killing themselves to come in too early, but
but still alone.
You're right. And sometimes they miscalculate and the riders do get cut.
Yeah. So a group of 25 ends up the road. They're fighting a bit. There's a lot of attacking happening within this group. People trying to go off the front of the group and sort of separate themselves from. And Michael Matthews does that. He goes off the front with 50K of the stage to go. And Alberto Bettiol follows from Team EF, amongst a few others, right? Great stage, great attacky end of the stage here.
Yeah, again, tactically, a great move by Matthews.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who had 2 second-place finishes in the first week, if I'm not mistaken. He hasn't won a tour stage since 2017.
Correct.
And he's kind of, maybe it's rude to call him a second-tier rider, but he is sort of a step down from riders like Wout in terms of wins and things like that. He has not had a high-profile win.
But he is kind of like an all-arounder like Wout. Right, he's good at climbing, even though he has a strong sprint.
Exactly. He did win the green jersey in 2017.
Correct. That was the 5 years. He won the stage that year, and he won the green jersey too.
Yeah, Sagan and Marcel Kittel. Sagan got disqualified. Marcel Kittel crashed out.
Yeah,
and so it kind of opened the door for him to win the green jersey.
Right.
And so just a great move by him tactically. Bettiol attacks him on the climb.
And ends up passing him.
Yeah. Matthews just paces him down, catches him, drafts a little bit, and then goes himself right at the top of the climb, gets away, and stays clear to win. Beautiful victory. Really a much needed win by Bike Exchange.
Absolutely.
Really making their tour. So happy to see that for Matthews, and he may be a favorite for the World Championships in Australia.
Yeah, that could be interesting. He's sort of like, he's been almost like plagued with second place appearances. When Betty Hall passed him, that's sort of what everyone thought was going to happen again, right? But he really like had a great finish to that stage. Do you know why people call him Bling? I tried to look it up. I didn't find anything.
I think he gave himself that nickname.
Yeah, so that I cannot stand behind, and he seems like the type of guy to give himself a nickname.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't hate Michael Matthews, but I don't like. He's good for him that he got a win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And good for Team Jayco Bike Exchange. They gotta change this name thing. It's so bad.
Oof.
Yeah, it's bad. Pog tries to separate himself at the end, right, from a GC sprint, and Jonas just hangs onto that wheel. So good.
Yeah.
So good. And now we're going to move into the final stage before the rest stage, stage 15. That happened today, the day that we're recording this. Rodez to Carcassonne, the last longest stage of the tour. Every stage from here is shorter than this one. 202 kilometers, rolling to a flat finish.
In 104 degree Fahrenheit.
That's right. It's 40 degrees Celsius. They keep telling us 40 degrees Celsius. I'm like, that's not that bad. I looked it up. 104.
104.
That sucks.
The tarmac will literally melt out there.
They got to use better asphalt, though.
Yeah.
Because it gets hot here and our roads don't melt.
No.
And their roads are melting all the time. It's been like a problem in the tour for like ever. Yes. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't quite understand that. I know it's very rare for it to get that hot. But like if it gets hot enough where your roads are melting, use something else to build your roads.
Maybe it makes it more epic. It's
so
hot, the roads are melting.
Right.
And they're still riding.
So before the stage even starts, we get two people drop out from COVID. That's Magnus Cort Nielsen and Simon Clark. And a huge, what I would say is a huge hit, but also probably a tactical decision a little bit from the team and from the rider. Primoz Roglic drops out of the tour due to the injuries that he has been riding with, essentially, for the past week and a half.
Right. So in the morning at the start of the stage, you'd think that this is a good decision by Jumbo-Visma. Yes. After what happens during the stage, you're like, maybe he should have hung in there one more day.
Right.
But basically, as we talked about, Primos's ability to ride has been going less and less.
Yes.
So they pulled him out. He may very well go to the Vuelta. He's won the Vuelta the last 3 years in a row. If he wins it this year, fourth win, I don't think anybody's ever won it more than 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So it could be a career-defining victory for him.
Yeah.
And from a sponsor standpoint, I'm sure they'd love to win the Vuelta as well. So, But what happens is in the middle of this stage, Steven Kruijswijk goes down and probably breaks his collarbone.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Wout also is involved in this skirmish, but all the footage I saw, Wout was already standing up, and Kruijswijk is having a really hard time getting up, right?
Yeah, so Kruijswijk is, again, a climber, domestique on Jumbo-Visma.
Some may say that he could be a GC contender on almost any other team.
He almost won the Giro d'Italia several years ago, and then crashed into a snowbank.
Yes, great rider, but some bad luck sometimes.
But so
it's risky. It's a risky job.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, Jonas is down not one but 2 of his super domestiques.
Right. And slightly later in this stage, Jonas himself goes down with Tish Benoit, right? But they both get up, and Jonas seems to get up like really quickly. And I've even heard him talking after the stage that he feels okay. But you go back to Primoz dropping out, and sure, maybe you think as a team like, okay, let's get right. Not only is it the rider's decision, right? Because I bet Primoz was like, hey, I'm really starting to hurt here. But the team is also thinking, okay, we're heading into a rest day. We have 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Let's save Roglic for the Vuelta, right? But now you have Kruijswijk goes out, Jonas goes down, Tish Benoit goes down. The teams are much more level now. The UAE, right? Yeah. UAE took some hits earlier. Jumbo's taking some hits now.
Exactly. This is just ratcheting up the tension for week 3 here, because all of a sudden the teams are on even par again, and it's just going to be Jonas versus Pog. He doesn't have Roglic to help him anymore.
So the rest of the stage, right? The whole group is back together with about 50K to go. 2 riders are off the front. There's a 30-second lead at 30K. Luke Rowe, man, what a rider. A lot of fun to watch. He's like yelling at everyone and keeping them together, getting different teams to work together. Great like management skills out there.
Yeah, Rowe's a rider I think he's ridden like, I don't know what it is.
A lot of Grand Tours.
8 Grand Tours or 8 tours or something like that.
He's on Team Ineos.
Yeah. And so a guy like that who's been around a long time kind of, demands respect from the other riders and can organize a chase like that and shut down a breakaway.
So the breakaway gets caught with the whole peloton sort of working together by Luke Rowe's management. And then there's a bunch sprint at the line. And an exciting bunch sprint, right? Wout's there, Jasper Philipsen's there, Mads Pedersen is there, and all three of them come across the line like bang, bang, bang. And it's pretty close. Obviously I was rooting for Wout to get that win, but Philipsen ends up taking that stage there.
Yeah.
Which is huge for Alpecin de Koenig.
Huge for Alpecin de Koenig. Philipsen rode the Tour last year and didn't win a stage. He was actually in tears on the Champs-Élysées after coming second to Wout in the last day. And so I was happy to see it. He's been waiting a long time for that win.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be big, right? You grow up and that's your dream to just ride in the Tour. Getting a stage win is absolutely huge, right? Yeah. So we go into the rest day. Not necessarily a shakeup in GC, right? Still the same timing that we've almost been talking about for the past 5 or 6 days now, right? But the teams are much different. Thomas still sits in 3rd place, right? Can Ineos change their tactics to work against UAE, to work against Jumbo, to work with the rest of the peloton, to work against both of those teams, right? Like, what do we see going forward here in terms of like team tactics?
I have no idea. That's the big question. Ineos does have some really strong domestiques. If they want to try to string it out, put Ghana on the front, use him like an atomic bomb. Basically, he can drop a ton of riders early on a climb that way. The question is if Thomas believes that he has the watts
to win,
to take 2 minutes back on Vingegaard. But maybe he's just been sitting behind Pog and Jonas, watching them destroy those climbs and thinking there's no way
they can hold on to week 3.
I can beat these guys.
So you're saying there's no way he can, right? But what if the opposite of the coin, right? Just to play devil's advocate, like what if he's like they're burning themselves out?
It could be if Thomas were to win
it'd be wild.
It would be wild.
It would be wild. It'd be amazing.
It'd be such an upset.
Yeah, it would be a huge upset. I would love to see it.
Yeah.
I would love to see it. Can we bet on that now?
Look how far we've come.
Oh, I know. Imagine that, though. That would be, like, amazing. I still am rooting for Jonas, right? Yeah. Rooting for Jumbo to win the Tour and the Vuelta. Not to fast forward to our Vuelta recap podcast. But, wow, what an exciting week 3 that would be. It's been 2 exciting weeks.
Wild.
Last year's tour started very exciting, I thought. The first week was exciting, 2021 tour. It sort of leveled out, right? Mm-hmm. Primoz dropped out. Pog was in the lead. He stayed in the lead forever. It was still an exciting tour. It's the tour. It's exciting. This year, 2 exciting weeks. Week 3, Geraint Thomas comes back.
Yeah,
wins the yellow.
Imagine if he's just sitting there biding his time, waiting for the moment to strike. And could you imagine if we get to stage 20, the last time trial, and they're all within like a minute of each other?
Oh, man. That'd be awesome. Whew. All good time trialists.
Yeah.
Pog, probably the best of the 3.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, Jonas is so light. He's got great form on the TT bike, but he's just it's the watts. Like, Pog just has that weight. And sure, watts to kilogram, right, is different than just pure output, but it's also a 40K time trial.
I wouldn't totally discount Thomas being able to upset.
You know what he's going to do? Take off the fucking jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't see Ineos and UAE working together to take out Jumbo. From what I've heard, Pog has tried to ask Ineos on a couple different occasions, like, help me out. Thomas sort of gave him the cold shoulder. And I heard that Luke Rowe basically told him to fuck off. So I like hearing that.
For sure. I think it's again, tactically very savvy. You have to be very shrewd, I think, if you want to win a Grand Tour.
Yeah.
And so it's better for Ineos to let UAE attack, burn themselves out.
Because Ineos has a strong team.
And then strike.
Yeah.
And we talked at the start of this podcast about how the order of the GC can really determine the race. And since UAE's in second place, it's up to them to try to get to first place.
Right. It's not up to Ineos.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they've had a strong tour already, right? Like they don't necessarily need to be chasing down stage wins at this point. Like Pidcock wins on Alpe d'Huez. Thomas is a great performance. Danny Martinez, solid performance, right? Like Pidcock sort of showing what he's capable of as such a young rider. They feel like, wow, we've had a great tour already. We don't need to go and like attack this strong team of Jumbo-Visma. We're not going to take out, like it's stuff like that is going to be really exciting going into this week, right? And the next time we sit down and talk, we'll know like who the winner of the tour is, right? Like, yeah. So exciting week to come. And do you have any, I don't know, not necessarily like predictions, or I personally think if Jonas can keep 2 minutes and 22 seconds on Pog before the time trial, it's pretty solid. But I would never count Pog out ever, unless it's 5 minutes going into stage 20.
Sure. Jonas looks incredibly strong.
Yes.
He looks like he's stronger than Pog, or at least equal to.
Yes.
But it's so hard to make a bet on who's going to win. Like you said, you would not be surprised if Pog could rally back and put a bunch of time into any of these guys.
Right.
But it's just, this has been such an exciting tour, such an exciting week. So often in the tour, the GC is already practically decided by now.
Yeah.
And so really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen.
Yeah, agreed. So that's week 2 of the tour. We're moving on to week 3. It's going to be super exciting. We're going to have 2 other things we're going to talk about. Real quick, I'd just like to talk about Americans in the tour, right? Earlier, we were talking about like American sports culture, and there are not as many Americans in the tour as there are Europeans. There aren't even as many North Americans, right? There's a handful of Canadians. We talked about Michael Woods earlier, but there's this one American in the tour that I refuse to even say his name anymore. He's getting like tons of screen time. Apparently NBC Sports is like covering him and like interviewing his family. And I think we should talk about the other Americans in the Tour de France.
Definitely.
So first off, I'm very comfortable saying I'm a Jumbo-Visma fanboy. Would you say that you're about yourself?
Definitely.
Okay, great. So as 2 Jumbo-Visma fanboys, let's talk about Sepp Kuss, right? He won stage 15 in last year's tour. We talked about him earlier, having like solid poles, sort of telling Pog to like, get out of here. You're not going to drop us. He came 8th in the 2021 Vuelta. I believe he's from Durango, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. 27 years old.
Yeah.
Whenever Jumbo has let him ride for himself,
yes,
he's won stages.
Right.
So he won a stage in the Dauphiné in 2020. He won a stage in the Tour last year.
Right. He won the Tour of Utah in 2018. Mm-hmm. Sure, not a huge Grand Tour, but he did win that.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that he could become a Grand Tour rider. He's had sort of up and down performances, but that's sort of typical when you're working as a domestique.
Right.
The question is, with guys like Jonas on the team,
right,
if Kuss will ever get to a level where Jumbo would give him a shot at a Grand Tour. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they, pay him back for all the work he's doing now by sending him to the Giro or the Vuelta in a leadership position. I will say that guys like Pog and Jonas kind of are peaking early, but a lot of people who win Grand Tours do so around 27, 28 is more the sweet spot.
So he's 27 now.
Mm-hmm.
You're not necessarily saying that he's counted out for like, I'd say the next 4 or 5 years. He could still have that potential.
Definitely.
But does he need to go to another team?
Right. I hope not. I hope he stays on Jumbo and they give him a shot.
Same. A team that I could see him going to would be a team like EF Education. Easy Post, another great name for a team. They have an American on their team, Nielsen Paulus. We talked about him a little bit before. He's formerly on Jumbo-Visma. Right, he helped Roglic win the Vuelta in 2019. He's 25 years old. You wrote down here that he's of Native American ancestry. I did not know that.
Yeah, he is, which actually makes him one of the first indigenous Americans to, I think, compete in UCI races and to win UCI races.
Yes.
So it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
we've both been texting each other about how handsome he is.
He is such a hunk. It's unbelievable. It's unreal. He's so handsome in that kit. Like, I just can't. So he's sort of brought to the Tour to help Rigoberto Urán, who, like, going into the Tour was who EF thought would be their GC contender. Turns out Nielsen Paulus is on great form right now, and he almost won a stage. Is he still in the top 10? I know he's in the top 20.
He fell out a while ago, so now he's kind of free to go in breakaways.
Right. But very exciting to watch. Like, he's still young. Yeah, I love watching him. I love watching EF. Right, they're an American-based team, which is interesting. There are not many of them. There is one more that the rider who shall not be named rides for. And the team, like, we talked about him a little bit earlier. But yeah, just not great all around. Brandon Mcnulty, who we've mentioned on the podcast before, he races for UAE Team Emirates. He rides for POG. Right, this guy is pulling Tadej Pogačar up mountains, right? So there's nothing. It's not like he's not a strong rider.
Yeah, just like Kuss and Paulus. It seems like this crop of young Americans,
right,
is really excelling in the domestique role.
Yes,
and hopefully they get their own chance to ride.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that he won the Tour of Sicily in 2019.
He won Tour of Sicily. He had a couple wins earlier this year in the Challenge Mallorca, I believe.
Yep.
So he's been on good form. And
15th in the Giro 2020, right? And he was also on this team last year when Pog won at the Tour. So yeah, a couple more Americans, a few more. Matteo Jorgensen, he races for Movistar. This is his Tour debut, right? He's in there for support of Enric Mas. He's 22 years old.
And came close to winning a stage.
Yeah, very close to winning a stage. Fourth at the Tour de la Provence this year. And he's I jokingly wrote down, is he the next Wout? Because he's a fast sprinter with climbing abilities. And he's still very young.
Very young.
And this is maybe xenophobic on my part, but I did not know that Matteo Jorgensen was an American. Right? That's a name I've heard a few times
also before. Surprised by that.
And I was surprised to hear that he was American. Not like this next guy who has a very American name, fucking Joe Dombrowski. Hey, dude, it's me, Joe Dombrowski. I race for Astana. He's the oldest of the American cyclists that we're going to talk about here. This is his first tour at the age of 31. He also won the Tour of Utah when he was with Team Cannondale. Not a team anymore.
Yeah, Dombrowski spent much of his career on Team Sky / Ineos, along with Ian Boswell, working, to help guys like Froome win the Tour.
Yeah.
He had iliac artery surgery in the middle of his career. So
they think that affected like his blood flow, right? His circulation.
Yeah, a lot of cyclists actually end up with that issue where, like, all of a sudden they just lack the power that they should have and end up having that surgery.
Yeah. Joe Dombrowski. And then Kevin Vermark, right? Is that how you say it?
I think
Vermark?
so.
I think so. He races for Team DSM. This is also his Tour debut. He's 21 years old. He's there to support Romain Bardet, who's had a pretty good tour so far. And Vermark, he was 11th in the Tour of Oman this year and 19th in the Tour of Norway. So young in a couple of, other not grand tours, basically 1 week stage races. But those were both very exciting races to watch earlier this year, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is DNF. I think he dropped out of this tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That might have just happened today or something.
Oh, interesting.
All right.
Yeah. So sorry, Romain Bardet, but you no longer have an American to chase, to pull you up the hills. Okay. So it's exciting, I think, to see Americans in the Tour, just because it's something like a little bit more to, relate to.
I think the future is bright.
Yeah, I think so too. And there are other like pro riders or pro Conti riders that are like on the rise. And even though a lot of pro Americans, like the previously mentioned Ian Boswell, just go and race gravel now in camo bib shorts, it is nice to see, there just being more American representation, because I don't think it's, a sport you necessarily think of first when you think of like an American sport, whether or not it's dominated by Americans, but just the participation level. We talked about Lance so much, and he was like such a big, name for such a long time. And we haven't really had a name that's like that huge that can bring Americans into watching like pro cycling. Because even people that we ride with don't necessarily watch pro cycling as much, right? Riding might just be like more of a, just like that is their hobby, and it's not all encompassing in terms of like watching it as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Lance's sort of downfall sort of hurt Americans' opinion of cycling.
Well, he was just he was more than a cycling person to look up to, but because of the whole Livestrong thing, right? And he beat cancer, and he was bringing this awareness to cancer, and like everyone was wearing yellow bracelets and like donating money, and it was huge, right? And it's sort of there was a betrayal. We felt betrayed by him.
Absolutely.
And that'll turn a lot of people off from cycling. Yeah. And now all you get is people in pickup trucks rolling coal.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's because of Lance. So the next time that we sit down and talk, the tour will be over. We'll be wrapping up, right? And on that last day of the men's tour is the start of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Yes.
Yeah. July 24th.
Yes.
You can watch it the same way you're watching the tour. It'll be on GCN. It'll be on Peacock, NBC Sports.
Yep.
And so definitely tune in.
Check it out. It starts earlier in the day. Stage 21 starts later in the day, right? Because they want to go through the Louvre and Champs-Elysees while the sun is setting. So the women's tour starts earlier. So the time that you would normally be watching the men's tour, you can be tuning into the women's tour before the men's. Yeah, so you dug into this a little bit, and we have some of the history of the Tour de France Femmes. A lot of people are sort of talking about this like it's the first one, but it is not the first one.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good just to give listeners sort of a quick overview of the history of the women's tour and sort of where women's cycling is at right now.
Yeah, it's exciting, I think.
Yeah, so there was actually the first official women's Tour de France. It was just a one-off race that happened in 1955.
Yeah.
But from 1984 to 1989, there was a official women's tour that ran concurrently with the men's race. It was just on the same course, just shorter distances. And the first edition was actually won by an American, Marianne Martin, who had just started cycling out of college and ended up winning the race. She got $1,000 in prize money.
Yep.
And then in 1989, the organizers canceled the race because it was costing too much. They did a different women's tour that was a smaller event at a different time of year.
They scaled it down. It was maybe only 10 stages or something, half the amount of stages, and not around the same time of year. So you don't get the same publicity, you don't get the same crowds, right?
And then more recently, the organizers tried to do just a one-day race called La Course that was either on the Champs-Elysees or on one of the more significant stages.
Yep.
And that drew some attention, but for a long time, there's been a push to bring back the women's Tour de France. Right. And there is some debate about that actually within the women's peloton, because they do have a race called the Giro d'On, which is basically a women's Giro d'Italia.
Right, and that was happening the first week of the tour.
Yeah, and the issue with that is it just doesn't get the media attention.
Right.
It's hard to watch on TV. A lot of times all we can do is kind of read about it.
Right.
But some women had been saying that we don't need a women's Tour de France, we just need people to start watching these other races that we have.
They're already doing all the time, right? Because there's a women's Paris-Roubaix, right? There are tons of other women's races. Now, the Tour de France has the name recognition, so maybe you get more people watching just based on that alone.
Exactly.
Which I think is a valid response, right? Zwift is putting it seems they're putting like a lot of time and effort behind this, which is great, right? Like, their marketing is pretty good, and they're doing a really good job at marketing this race.
Absolutely. And I think the timing of it, having it run right after that, especially with this tour turning out to be one of the most exciting in years, it's really good timing, I think, for the women. The women's Paris-Roubaix, they just introduced that a few years ago. That turned out to be a fantastic race.
Yeah.
And I'll also mention ultra endurance racing. I know some of our friends who might listen to this podcast are into things like the Ride the Divide.
We've spoken about Lael Wilcox on the podcast before.
Lael Wilcox has actually, I think she won the Race Across America. Not just the best women's finisher, but the best overall finisher. And then in 2019, there was a woman named Fiona Kohlbringer who won the Transcontinental Race, which is a huge ultra-endurance bikepacking race. That's a ton of prestige. And so some people actually would argue that women in some way might be better at ultra-endurance racing than men.
Oh, interesting.
But so this year, Tour de France avec Zwift, or Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift.
Great name, rolls right off the tongue.
So it's a week-long race. We got 3 sprint stages, 3 hilly stages, and 1 mountain finish.
Right, it was a super
planche de Belleville.
Yeah, right.
And this is all in the Vosges region.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But Christian Prudhomme, who's the race organizer for the Tour de France, he loves this region. Yep. He actually has talked about doing a race with a Tour de France without any Alps or Pyrenees.
And just around that area?
And just sort of around hillier areas of France with some mountain finishes, but nothing super tall. He thinks it'd be a more exciting race. So I think this is a little bit of a testing ground for that.
Yeah.
And to quickly give you a sense of who some of these riders are.
Right.
So Marianne Voss is a Dutch cyclist. She's 35 years old. The Dutch women's cyclists for some reason, Dutch women dominate cycling.
Absolutely.
35 years old. She's on Jumbo-Visma. And in her career, she has won everything.
Right.
She's won like 8 cyclocross world championships.
Some may say she's the most dominant cyclist of all time, period, because of the amount of like medals and wins and podiums that she has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her teammate, Corinne Lebecki, who you may also know by her maiden name, Corinne Rivera, also on Jumbo-Visma. This is an American rider. She was the winner of the 2017 Tour of Flanders, which actually made her the first American to ever win a Tour of Flanders.
She just had a great Paris-Roubaix this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a sprinter, and I'd love it if the team gave her some chances to win in this race. My personal favorite in the women's peloton is a rider named Cecilie Uttrup Ludwig, who's a Danish rider on FDJ.
Yeah, you show me this great clip of her from the 2019 Tour of Flanders, and it's so good that we'll just put it in here like we did with the Pidcock interview last episode. So yeah, how do you say her name one more time?
Cecilie Uttrup Ludwig
from the 2019 Tour of Flanders. Yeah, so her energy in that is amazing, and I will now watch every interview I can of hers on YouTube.
Yeah, and the thing about Cecilie was that she, for a long time, was chasing a win. She hadn't won a major race, and finally got one or 2 years ago. And this year, she is the Danish national champion. Yeah. So you'll see her in that kit in this race. Yeah. Fantastic character to watch. She's just very animated.
Right.
And then probably the favorite for the tour is a woman named Annemiek van Vleuten.
Right. Almost as dominant as Marianne Voss. Right. Always, it's usually them fighting it out for a race.
Yeah, she's on Movistar.
Yeah.
And
she just won the Giro Dome.
Correct. Yeah, just won the Giro Dome. If you follow her on Strava, she puts in tons of miles.
Yes.
Amazing. And so
a lot of fun to watch. They seemingly have like a great rivalry and a great relationship, right? Annemiek van Vleuten and Marianne Voss. Are they both Dutch?
Yes.
Yes, they are. And yeah, it's going to be a super exciting race. So you just watch 3 weeks of the tour, watch another week of the women's tour. Yeah. Why not? Just keep it going. Because then soon enough, the Vuelta will be here. There's a couple of things in between. I know it's kind of dull in between.
Well, we get the build up to the World Championship.
That's right.
Which is in September.
Yep.
And then there's some Italian fall classics as well. Right.
Lombardia.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, like if for some reason this podcast encouraged you to watch cycling more, watch the women's tour, because like that's what it needs, is people to watch it on streaming, right? Like that is what encourages sponsors to pick it up, right? Like that's, you talk about it's $250,000 prize money, which is good. It's not nearly as good as the men's. Is the men's $1 million?
No, 400,000, 450. Yeah.
So still a fraction, not necessarily a quarter, but it's still a fraction. And we just need people to watch women's cycling so that there can be more women's cycling. There needs to be more diversity in cycling, not just white men. Let's get Dutch women, Black women, right? Like, let's just get everyone riding bikes and watching bike racing. And like, if that's something that excites you, I understand it might not excite everyone. If it doesn't excite you and you've just listened to like 1 hour and 10 minutes of this podcast, thanks, I guess. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. But yeah, I'm pumped on it. And to me, it's another week of like exciting cycling and amazing views. And my GCN Plus subscription is going from 1 month to 1 year. Yeah,
this tour has been so great. It's left me craving as much content as I can get. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to tune in for this race.
Yeah, and maybe we do a recap after that happens too, because why not?
Yeah.
I'd love to do that.
Definitely.
So yeah, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No.
Exciting week, 2 weeks of cycling. The final week of the men's race and the first week of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift.
Can't wait.
Avec just means with Zwift or from Zwift.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting good at French. Col de Granon. Pretty good.
L'Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah, I like Super Planche de Belleville. That one I remember I really struggled with in the preview show. Mm-hmm. So... dude, it's just a super planche. It's different than the planche because it's friggin' gravel at the top.
Super.
Okay, thank you so much, Cal.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Decaf left, regular right. Decaf left, regular right. It's very challenging work.